Welcome back to the deep dive. Before we even crack the spine on today's material, I have a very specific request for you.
Here we go.
Yeah, look, if you value independent analysis, the kind of stuff that goes where the algorithm usually refuses to tread, you need to like this video and subscribe to the show right now. It really helps us keep the lights on.
And keep these deep dives coming, absolutely.
Exactly. So today, we are looking at a document that is, well, it's causing quite a stir in some of the more underground health communities. It's titled Diabetes Fraud Drugs, Denial of Weight Loss, and Exercise Lifestyle Cure. And it's by Conrad Riker.
And honestly, calling it a health book feels like a misnomer.
Yeah.
Riker himself frames this as a war manual.
Yeah.
You aren't just looking at diet tips or exercise routines here. What we are analyzing is what Riker calls a medical matrix.
Right. And for anyone listening who wants to verify this data themselves, and Riker is very big on verification, you can grab the book right now on Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books.
Highly recommend having it open.
Yeah, it's available electronically, so you can literally be reading right along with us.
Yeah.
He also writes over at the handle at Conrad and Riker on Substack.
Mm-hmm.
But let's get into the core premise here, because it is aggressive.
Yeah.
Riker argues that type 2 diabetes is not a chronic disease in the traditional sense.
No, he argues it is a manufacturing defect of modern society. The central thesis here is that the medical-industrial complex has been captured culturally and financially to turn men into profitable, docile patients.
Yeah, there's that line.
There is a line in the preface that really sets the stage. He says, "You're holding a book that should not exist. Truth has been exiled from medicine."
That is a heavy accusation. I mean, we're talking about institutional capture here. Riker spends the entire introduction arguing that feminist and Marxist ideologies have essentially infiltrated healthcare.
Right, prioritizing feelings over physiology. And just to be clear for the listener, we are reporting on the arguments presented in the text here. We're breaking down his perspective.
Exactly. We're just unpacking the source material, and he calls it the long march through the medical schools. The argument is that we've moved from a model of objective biological reality to a model of care that prioritizes emotional safety.
And Riker posits that this shift has resulted in the metabolic castration of the modern male. He says it's not an accident, it's a design feature.
So let's peel back the layers of this design. The book starts with what he calls the Apollonian deception.
Yes.
This is the statistical foundation of the whole diabetes epidemic. And it all hinges on one specific year, which is 1997.
Right, 1997 is the year the map changed. Chapter 1 details this great statistical fraud because prior to this date, the American Diabetes Association, the ADA, held that a fasting glucose level of 140 milligrams per deciliter was the threshold for diabetes.
Okay, so 140.
Yeah, 140. So if you were 130, you were considered physiologically normal, you were healthy.
And then the goalposts moved.
Drastically.
Huh.
The ADA lowered the thresholds from 140 to 126. Now, to the average person listening, moving a number on a chart by 14 points, it just sounds bureaucratic.
Sure.
But Riker explains the mechanism here. By lowering that number, they didn't discover a new virus. They simply expanded the net. So overnight, literally overnight, millions of men who went to sleep healthy woke up sick.
And they became customers.
That is the alchemy for profit that Riker describes. He points to the financial fallout immediately following this decision. In the 12 months after those guidelines changed, stock prices for major insulin manufacturers, he specifically calls out Novo Nordisk, they jumped 22%.
Wow. I mean, that's a massive correlation.
It is, and the book argues it wasn't a coincidence. He outlines the funding structure of the ADA, noting that they receive significant sponsorship from pharmaceutical giants, companies like Eli Lilly and AstraZeneca.
So the entity defining what constitutes sickness is financially tethered to the entities selling the treatment for that sickness.
Precisely.
He calls this the pharmaceutical Ouroboros.
Yeah, the ancient symbol of the snake eating its own tail. It is a closed loop. The system doesn't want cures because a cure exits the loop.
Right. A cured patient is a lost customer.
Exactly. If you fix the problem, the revenue stops. The system wants management. It wants a chronic condition that requires monthly prescriptions for 30 or 40 years.
So the argument is that normal blood sugar is actually a financial construct, not just a biological one. That's a wild paradigm shift for you to consider as a listener.
It definitely changes how you look at a lab result.
It really does. But Riker shifts gears in part 2. He argues that this isn't just about greed, it is about a cultural attack on masculinity itself. This is where he introduces the feminization of medicine.
And this section is likely to be the most controversial part of the book for some people. but it is entirely central to his thesis. Riker uses this metaphor of the yoga studio to explain the displacement of male spaces.
Oh, the Portland story.
Yes. He describes this specific Masonic temple in Portland, a building that was historically designed for ritual brotherhood history. And he details how it was gutted and turned into a breathe into your authentic self yoga studio.
Yeah, it's a very visceral image of replacement.
It symbolizes the loss of what Riker calls the brotherhood protocol. He argues that men historically had spaces, barbershops, lodges, gyms, and these were spaces predicated on stoic action.
You didn't go there to complain.
Right, you didn't go there to whine, you
Yeah.
went there to sharpen yourself. And the book claims those spaces have been systematically replaced or infiltrated by unisex environments that prioritize emotional processing.
And his point is that this cultural shift, this focus on emotional processing, has actually infected the doctor's office.
Exactly. He critiques the therapeutic state. The modern healthcare approach often defaults to a feminine communication style. Things like, how does that make you feel? Let's talk about your anxiety.
And Riker argues that for men, this is metabolically toxic. That men don't need to process their diabetes, they need to attack it.
Right, it's a call to action over a call to therapy.
He gives a really stark example of this with that group in Austin, the Iron Tribe. I found this story absolutely fascinating because it runs counter to everything we are told about support groups in modern culture.
It really does. So this is a group of 12 men, all of them either diagnosed diabetic or pre-diabetic, and they explicitly rejected the standard support group model.
No sitting in a circle sharing struggles.
None of that.
Yeah.
Instead, they used shame as a weapon. They set up a whiteboard, and every single week they had to post their blood sugar numbers and their weight in front of all the other men in the tribe.
So if you slipped up and ate a dozen donuts, you didn't get a hug, you got roasted.
You got zero sympathy, you got extreme accountability. Riker argues that this masculine form of social pressure is highly effective because it leverages the innate male desire for status and respect among peers.
And the results were insane.
According to the book, yes. They saw a 100% reversal of diabetes symptoms within 1 year.
100%.
With no medication.
Yeah.
Just pure competition and the sheer fear of letting down the tribe.
But the medical system today almost explicitly prohibits that kind of approach, doesn't it? I mean, Riker talks about the customer service doctor.
Yes, the HTAHPS score system. That's HGCAHPS. Is a real metric used in hospitals to determine funding, and it's based entirely on patient satisfaction surveys.
Like a Yelp review for your doctor.
Exactly like that.
Yeah.
And Riker points out the immense danger here. If a doctor looks a man in the eye and tells him the hard truth, says, you are fat, you are lazy, and you are actively killing yourself, that patient is highly likely to leave a 1-star review calling the doctor rude and abrasive.
So the doctor is financially incentivized to lie, or at least just to be nice.
To be agreeable. Riker asserts that the system, and this is a quote, doesn't want men to speak unless they speak softly, agreeably, and with tears.
Wow.
It creates a dynamic where the doctor validates the patient's feelings rather than correcting their physiology. It completely prioritizes the customer experience over the hard, uncomfortable truth required for an actual cure.
It's asking for compliance, not strength. And speaking of compliance, let's talk about what they actually want us to eat. Because Riker dedicates a massive chunk of the book to the carbohydrate lie and the war on meat.
This goes all the way back to the post-World War II era, specifically to Ansel Keys.
The architect of the lipid hypothesis.
Yes, and Riker frames Keys not just as a bad scientist, but as an active manipulator. The book claims he cherry-picked data for his famous 7-country study to deliberately demonize saturated fat.
Right, because he famously ignored data from countries like France, places where there was high consumption of cheese, butter, and meat, but very low rates of heart disease.
Exactly. He tossed out the French paradox because it didn't fit his predetermined narrative.
And that flawed narrative is what eventually gave us the USDA food pyramid. Grains at the massive bottom, meat used sparingly at the tiny top.
Which Riker relentlessly compares to a study done at Yale with rats. So researchers gave these rats processed sugar pellets, and the researchers literally nicknamed these pellets Crack with Crunch.
Crack with crunch.
Yeah. The rats became so violently addicted that they would choose the sugar pellets over real food, even when they were being subjected to electric shocks just to get them.
That's terrifying.
Riker argues the modern food environment is simply a massive Skinner box designed to create that exact same biological addiction in human beings.
But he goes even further than just sugar. He specifically attacks what he calls the soy agenda. Now, we hear constantly that plant-based diets are the moral future, but Riker calls this biologically detrimental for men.
He focuses heavily on the hormonal impact. Soy contains phytoestrogens, which mimic estrogen in the human body. Riker argues that for a man, a diet high in soy and processed plant proteins actively contributes to lower testosterone levels.
And he frames testosterone as the CEO of the metabolism.
Yes.
What does that mean exactly? CEO of the metabolism.
It means testosterone dictates how your body handles and partitions energy. High testosterone promotes muscle growth and burns fat. Low testosterone promotes fat storage and insulin resistance,
So if you're eating a diet that suppresses your testosterone,
which Riker argues the standard plant-based recommendations absolutely do.
then you are chemically predisposing yourself to be fat and diabetic.
You're rigging the game against your own biology. And he ties this directly into the current push for synthetic meat, the whole Bill Gates angle.
Right, the lab-grown stuff.
He views the patenting of seeds and the push for lab-grown meat as a form of agrocolonialism. It is fundamentally about removing male self-reliance.
If you can hunt a deer or raise a cow, you are an independent man.
But if you have to buy patented protein sludge from a multinational corporation, you are a dependent subject. You rely on the matrix to survive.
So the rebellion is dietary. He points to guys like Firefighter Mike in the book. Men who just completely ignored the pyramid, went full carnivore steak, eggs, butter, and entirely fixed their metabolic health.
It's the carnivore solution.
Okay.
And the key biochemical concept here is bioavailability. Riker emphasizes that the nutrients in meat are highly bioavailable, meaning the human body can absorb and use them immediately with very little waste.
Unlike plants.
Right. Nutrients in plants are often bound up in dense fiber or anti-nutrients that make them very hard to access. He argues that modern men are overfed on calories, but literally starving for actual nutrition.
Now, I want to pivot to what I found to be the most chilling chapter in the entire book. Chapter 6, the legal medical nexus. Because we usually treat health and the law as two totally separate worlds, but Riker draws a direct biological line between the family court system and male mortality.
This is a critical insight for his specific audience. Riker argues that the family court system functions as a machine for systemic liquidation of male assets and health.
He tells that story of the engineer.
Yes, a highly successful, high-earning, perfectly healthy man who goes through a brutal divorce. He loses 70% of his income, he loses access to his children, and within 2 years of the final ruling, he drops dead of a massive heart attack.
And the medical examiner just calls it natural causes.
Right, they label it stress-induced cardiomyopathy. But Riker breaks down the actual mechanism here. When a man is dragged through years of legal warfare, his body enters a permanent, unyielding state of fight or flight. And this heavily spikes cortisol.
And this is where the biology gets technical, but it's so important. What does that chronic cortisol actually do to a man's blood sugar?
This is the key to the whole chapter. When cortisol floods the system, it signals the liver to dump huge amounts of glucose directly into the bloodstream.
Okay.
Biologically, evolutionary speaking, this is to give you instant energy to fight a tiger or run away from a threat. But in a courtroom setting, you aren't running.
You're just sitting there at a table seething.
Exactly. So all that glucose floods the blood, but it isn't being burned off by the muscles. It just sits there, stagnating and triggering a massive insulin response to try and clear it out.
So the state is literally causing the diabetes.
Precisely. Chronic legal stress absolutely destroys insulin sensitivity. You can eat a perfect diet, but if the court system is keeping your cortisol redlined for 24 straight months, your metabolism will inevitably collapse.
Riker calls this the vulnerability hustle.
Yes. The state breaks the man financially and emotionally through the courts, and then the medical system steps in. But they don't step in with justice. They step in with SSRIs and statins.
They medicate the symptom of the injustice rather than stopping the injustice itself.
Right. The system treats the man first as an asset to be stripped, and then as a patient to be managed. It is an incredibly grim picture.
It is grim. But the book isn't just a list of grievances. Part 5 creates a real actionable roadmap out of this mess. Riker calls it the Brotherhood Protocol.
The underlying premise here is sovereignty. Riker is very, very clear on this point. The cavalry is not coming. The doctor is not going to save you. You have to red pill your own metabolism.
And that starts with what he calls gravity as medicine.
He places a massive emphasis on heavy lifting. But again, he explains the mechanism behind it. Muscles are glucose sinks. More muscle mass you have on your frame, the more places your body has to safely store sugar without it turning into fat or poisoning your bloodstream.
He cites that incredible study from Toyota City in Japan.
Yes, this was a fascinating corporate intervention.
Yeah.
So the factory implemented a mandatory heavy squat routine for its line workers. They didn't change the cafeteria diet at all, they just added squats.
And what happened?
Productivity went up, which obviously the company liked, but average blood glucose levels across the entire workforce dropped significantly. It perfectly proves Riker's point. We have removed physical struggle from our daily lives, and our physiology is rotting because of it. We desperately need to reintroduce gravity.
He also talks extensively about fasting, calling it the law of return.
He strongly promotes 16.8 fasting, but he frames it philosophically rather than just as a diet trick. He argues that modern snack culture was basically invented by industrial factory owners to keep workers constantly producing without taking real breaks.
Keep them grazing.
Exactly. By constantly feeding, you are constantly spiking insulin, which keeps you in a sedated, lethargic, fed state. Fasting is a rebellion against that. It is a daily declaration that you are not a slave to the vending machine.
And finally, he wants us to become data insurgents.
This is all about using cheap technology to bypass the medical gatekeepers entirely. Riker advocates for every single man to use a continuous glucose monitor, a CGM.
Even if they aren't diagnosed as diabetic.
Especially then. Riker says you cannot trust the standard of care because the standard is explicitly designed to wait until you are already broken before they intervene. He wants men to wear these sensors to see the biological truth for themselves in real time.
Right, so you eat that bowl of heart-healthy oatmeal the doctor told you to eat.
And you literally watch your phone screen as your blood sugar violently spikes to 200.
The raw data just completely cuts through the narrative.
Exactly. The men in the Iron Tribe, they used cheap Walmart glucose meters. They didn't need a PhD to tell them what was happening to their bodies. They saw the numbers themselves. Riker calls this citizen science. It is about seizing the means of diagnosis.
So if we zoom out for a second, what is the ultimate takeaway for you, the listener? We have covered the statistical fraud, the feminization of the spaces, the diet, the family courts.
The core takeaway is that a healthy man is a free man. Riker's ultimate argument is highly political. The system, this medical matrix, fears the cured man because a cured man cannot be monetized.
Right.
If you are physically strong, if your mind is sharp and clear because you aren't trapped in a permanent sugar coma, and if you are emotionally stoic, you are dangerous to the status quo. You become ungovernable in the absolute best sense of the word.
Metabolic autonomy as the ultimate
It
rebellion.
is the only rebellion that actually works. You can vote all you want, you can argue online, but if you do not have your physical vitality, you have nothing. The very first territory you have to conquer is your own biology.
That is a powerful place to land. But it makes me think of one final provocative thought that Riker doesn't explicitly state, but it builds right on his premise.
Let's hear it.
What if true health isn't just about avoiding disease? What if it's about becoming completely invisible to the consumer grid?
Oh, I like that.
Think about it. If you control your own glucose, you control your own mood and your own impulses, which means you are suddenly immune to fear-based marketing, not just in healthcare, but across the board. By mastering your metabolism, you aren't just getting fit. You are literally starving the system of your attention and your money. You're going off-grid biologically.
Biological independence is the prerequisite for political independence. That is exactly where this philosophy leads.
Look, we have gone incredibly deep today, but this book is dense. There are detailed chapters on the history of the FDA, very specific lifting protocols, and deep dives into the biochemistry that we simply did not have time to cover here.
Absolutely. This conversation resonated with you at all, you need to read the source code for yourself.
So here is the call to action for you. Go to Amazon Kindle or Google Playbooks right now. Look up Diabetes Fraud Drugs, Denial of Weight Loss, and Exercise Lifestyle Cure by Conrad Riker. Buy it. Do not wait for the movie, because Hollywood certainly isn't going to make this one.
No, they are not. And get on his Substack too. It's at Conrad and Riker. He is publishing ongoing analysis that tracks these specific trends in real time. It's an essential resource for navigating through all the noise.
And finally, a reminder from me. Content like this, raw analysis that questions the fundamental structures of our institutions, it does not get promoted by the algorithm, it gets buried. So if you want us to keep doing this, you have to support it directly. Like the video, subscribe to the deep dive, and share this link with a man in your life who needs to wake up.
The information is out there now. The choice to act on it is yours.
Stay strong, stay sovereign. We will see you in the next deep dive.